Sportsman's Challenge.
Sportsman's Challenge is brought to you by Zepco, Quantum, Motor Guide, the top names in fishing, Skeeter, performance fishing boats, Stanley Jigs, get the edge with the wedge, Mustad, the fish hook people, Uncle Josh, makers of the original pork frog and new glitter pork. And Lunker City, makers of Sluggo, finesse fish, and hypertail.
Intelligent anglers know the importance of learning to fish weeds and wood. Both kinds of structure are proven fish magnets. But they know they also need to learn to fish rocks. Good morning and welcome to Sportsman's Challenge. I'm Ron Franklin. You know, the best way to learn fishing is from the professionals, and you'll find the pros right here on Sportsman's Challenge. In fact, today our pros, Lonnie Stanley, Doug Hannon, and Mike Dias, will reveal why timing is so very important when it comes to fishing rocks. And also, they'll show you which baits are the most effective and share their favorite techniques for fishing rocks. It's important to know the characteristics of the structure that attracts fish. Weeds and wood produce algae, which attracts bait fish. The bait fish draw the bass. Weeds and wood also provide excellent ambush points. Rocks offer a different kind of attraction.
You know, just like weeds and timber, rocks come in all shapes and sizes. And you have anything from great big slabs of rock to big blocks to small rock rubble. The main thing to look for when you're looking at rocks is the nooks and crannies, the cracks, the places where fish can hide.
You know, a lot of times a lot of people come through here and you can see the bottom over in 8-10 inches of water. Right up next to the bank, you can actually see the bottom. And this wind blowing in, it's got that water muddied up a little bit. Now, I see a lot of bait fish, a lot of shad moving around up there in less than 2 foot of water. A lot of people coming down through here fishing these rocks won't fish that shallow.
These rocks right here show depth because it's more sheer, it's more straight down. I know that these rocks are shallower because the grass is here. This would be a great place to start in the morning. You've got depth and you've got shallow water, so these fish are going to be stayed somewhere between that deep water there, which was more or less an escape route, and this grass, which is this shallow area here that they usually feed on early in the morning.
On Lake Anywhere, the lake that exists only through the magic of television, we can see the variety of rock structure to be fished. The dam and this bridge have riprap, good places to search for fish in the spring. This rock ledge will shade fish in the summer. The submerged rock pile will hold fish in the late summer and fall.
I got a little one.
Once you determine the fish you're holding in rocky structure, you should select your bait according to how the fish are reacting. For an active fish, best bet baits are worms or jigs fished slowly on the rocks. Spinnerbaits and crankbaits bumped along the rock bed work well on active fish.
If you're going to fish the calm or if you got no wind, fish out deep, either Carolina rig or maybe jig fish deep out on the calm days. But when the wind starts blowing those shad in, take you a spinnerbait or a small crankbait and get right up on the bank. A lot of times those fish will move up in those rocks, feed on the crawfish, and the shad is present in those rocks.
My favorite ways to fish rocks or riprap is with the Carolina rig. And when you skip over these rocks, your bait or your worm is actually hopping. You know, if you pull a Carolina rig worm straight across a flat surface, it's not going to have much action to it. So what you want to do is fish a Carolina rig on the rocks because it's actually going to make your bait a little more lifelike.
Well, when you have decided to add fishing rock piles to your repertoire, there's some techniques you need to learn. Today, we're fishing a rock pile that's about 10 to 12 feet right here. I'm fishing a worm, but I want to get it down there quickly. But after I get it there quickly, I want to fish it very slowly. So I have Carolina rigged it.
But the weight on the Carolina rigs is something that gets constantly hung up in the little cracks in the rocks. So what I do to minimize this potential is actually use two weights. Normally a Carolina has a fairly heavy weight, so I'll take two slip sinkers to build the weight, putting them both back to back above my swivel. And as you can see, this would have a much greater chance of coming through cracks in the rocks than with this particular lure.
One of the most productive things I like to do is come to the mouth of these creeks in early fall, like in October, November, after a couple of cold fronts, and find some rocky points and stuff, something that's a little bit different, like a sandbar, a red clay bank come down. Then you got a bunch of rocks that come off in the water, something that breaks the structure up. I like to take a spinnerbait or a crankbait right in the mouth of these creeks and fish these little individual rock piles that come off in the water, buzzing a spinnerbait or running a crankbait down it. A lot of times in the fall of the year, the fish will start moving out of the deeper water and start getting real active. Or what? Good fish.
Remember, learn the types of rocky structure which hold fish and the best times to fish them. Know which baits work best, and don't forget about technique to get the most out of your rock fishing experience. Weeds, wood, rocks, you name it. Our pros can fish it. The proof when Sportsman's Challenge continues right after this.
Why a tanning?
What do you do during the dog days of summer in the midst of a central Texas heat wave when temperatures reaching 100 degrees are an everyday occurrence? Well, if you're a true Texas sportsman, you hunt. You first scout the outer edges of the riprap where you expect to locate your game. But today, your game has relocated. So the hunt continues. Finally, persistence pays off. And you choose your weapon. Ultralight spinning tackle with 8-pound test line. Your ammunition, a small shad-like soft plastic bait. And your game, schooling bass.
Look at those breaking the water over there. Right behind you. Right there. Drop. There he is. Well, that's not a bad fish. Look at that. That's not a bad fish.
Oh, he's a beauty. Look at that.
They're right under those birds. This wind's kicking up. You can't really see. Oh, buddy. Come here. He wore out. Whoa. It's one of the few lakes I've ever seen. You know, 100-degree weather, 95-degree water. These fish just come on up off that thermocline, feeding on that shad. Okay, that's not a bad schooling fish right there. Come on, little buddy. Okay, let's see what we can do again here. Get something else going.
It's a fascinating sight to behold. The feeding frenzy of schooling bass. A lesson taught by these masters of flight who study their prey carefully. Taking notes on this activity is our own Mike Dias and fellow Texas native Randy Wimbish, who hope to graduate with honors and teach the class a lesson.
You know, one of the things that we were talking about before you came out on the water today, you went over and got your rods and you had it all geared up for heavy tackle. Did it surprise you when I told you we were going to fish with 8-pound tests?
Yeah, it did. It
sure did.
But I tell you what, when you get a chance to catch fish in open water like this, I think you're missing a real opportunity as far as with ultralight, fishing with ultralight. I think that it certainly adds to the excitement of the day. Now, most of the times when you fish for school fish, I know for a fact that most people think pound and a half, 2 pound fish. But these school fish out here surprised you, didn't they?
They sure did.
We're fishing 70 foot of water, and the fish are over the top of the 70 foot of water. I mean, we're virtually throwing those little plastic baits as a top water. I think it's a real opportunity if somebody to take advantage of it.
And take advantage of it is exactly what Mike and Randy did. Searching, scouting, and working with their feathered friends to locate the student body of schooling bass.
That's a pretty big school there. Let's see what we can do. There he is, bumping it again. There we go. Oh, look at this.
That's nicer than the first one.
It's the darndest thing I've ever seen. It's the darndest lake I've ever seen in August. It'll be 100 degrees, 95-degree water, and the fish are schooling. Oh, come on, bub. That's not a bad fish.
Hey, that one there go about 4 pounds too, won't it?
Yeah, I think so. Ah. Look at that. That's a nice fish, Randy.
It sure is.
He's 4.5 pounds. Nice fish. Okay, well, we gotta stay close to those birds and we'll catch some more like this. Nice fish.
I'm gonna throw out there and see if I can catch one just like it. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Take your time with him now.
Oh man, that's a good one.
Oh yeah, that's a nice fish. Get that tip up. Don't reel him all the way down to that tip. Just let him play the slack.
Oh yeah, I got it.
I think that's the biggest fish of the day. I really do.
I think it's about the same size as the one you caught at
I'm
first thing
telling you,
this
that's
morning.
a nice fish. TV star. Now look straight in that camera and wave at the wife and kids now. And all the guys at work. Show them what it looks like. That's not as big as mine though, is it? Is it? Huh?
Regardless of what kind of music you like, I guess you could say this is the rock section of the show coming up.
Yeah, Ron, so let's rock and roll.
Okay. The Bass Professor coming up next here on Sportsman's Challenge.
Last year, quantum...
And some people say, you know, they don't have situations with their home lakes that they fish where they either contend with or use rocks. Let's talk about that.
Well, that's true, Ron, in some areas of the country, but a lot of the country, especially up north, has an abundance of rock lakes due to all the glaciers sweeping the topsoil off and basically grinding out these lakes. So we have any degree of rocky lakes from the big lakes that are nothing but boulders all the way down to those that are basically mixed up with a lot of gravel, depending on how much work the glacier did. So we've got a lot of rock to talk about.
Okay. Is one way to put it. All right, for the guy that's sitting at home saying, all right, educate me as to, you know, what does a rock do? We've talked about fishing wood and grass and just, you know, structure in general. How close of a parallel is rock along with those things that we've already discussed?
Well, Ron, rocks are what I would put at the bottom of the list in terms of attractiveness to fish, because they don't bring, you remember we talked about waves bringing everything to the table, and the rocks don't bring everything. The rocks are basically a structure, and by their very structure, they can provide opportunities, little nooks and crannies for organic matter to collect and then start a food chain. But to have bass and to have fish, you have to have the elements of the food chain to start to feed the thing. So the rocks provide that. And where the lake is predominantly rock, that's what you have to deal with. So you have to be able to choose the best kind of rocks.
Okay, what about riprap? This is something that all of us deal with, whether you're in the north or in the south. And of course, I'm talking about the rock that is put, you know, in the dammed areas.
Well, you know, one thing about riprap, we talked about the importance of current. Riprap is put there by man to combat erosion. What does that tell you? There's current there. They put it around the dams where the water flow is the greatest. They put it where there's shoreline erosion, on jetties and that, where there's waves. So all that water action is what makes riprap key. So when you fish riprap, look for those areas of dynamic water and the times that the water is dynamic. And either rough weather, that'll shake all the prey out of those nooks and crannies, or when they're pulling water.
Doug, there are some people that feel as though that rock also has causes a variance in temperature as far as the water that surrounds it. Is that true or false, or is it enough that it's something that you really have to concern yourself with?
Well, there's a lot of things. You're hitting on it right there. My feeling is that people can take something that can be finitely measured and say, well, this is important because they can't explain something another way. I don't think that that is as important as understanding that the type of rock to look for. The type of rock you want to look for is that which has the most surface area. That means broken up rock, you see, because the more the surface area, the more there are places to collect organic matter. And you want the nooks and crannies in those rocks, the little holes, to be large enough to hold prey that would be bite-sized for bass. This leaves out fine gravel, for instance, and brings us into the preferred size, being the size of grapefruits, to fists, to, you know, that size of rock. That's what to look for if you look for nothing else.
And gravel, as we well know, as you mentioned, that is as good an area, regardless of what part of the country you're in, as any as you can find to fish.
Yeah, as long as it's large enough. We're talking big gravel, you know, and the fine gravel is good to spawn on, you see, because it doesn't have the nooks and crannies to lose the eggs in, so the bass like to get on something where they can't lose their eggs down in the crack. So they'll spawn on gravel, but they feed on larger rock.
Rocks. Thanks. Some good tips. Doug Hannon, Bass Professor. See you next week. We'll be back with more on Sportsman's Challenge after we pause for this.
Sportsman's Challenge is brought to you by Zepco, Quantum, Motor Guide, the top name